Well, this is really a pleasure. It takes some getting used to the fact that we're doing this, and there's so many time zones. I especially want to thank all these wonderful writers who have have come will read for us tonight, and I think it's something like six different time zones. It's amazing the reach of this with technology. We used to just have readings in New York at the Strand bookstore, and we were lucky to have 100 people in there. So it's my pleasure now to introduce Bill Henderson. Bill Henderson has been awarded the 2020 Distinguished Service to the Arts citation by the American Academy of Arts and Science. And let me read a part of what the Academy stated about him. Editor and visionary publisher Bill Henderson began Pushcart Press 50 years ago to celebrate under-celebrated writers. Devoted to publishing literature that is deserving and non-commercial, Pushcart Prize started with founding editors George Kell Oates, Paul Bowles, Ralph Ellison, and others, and continues today as the publisher of the prestigious Pushcart Prize anthology. Well, this is high praise from an incredible organization, and but especially for one that thrives outside what Bill would call the prison walls of commercial publishing. I'm proud to say that my own publisher, Norton, is employee-owned and independent, and proudly distributes the Pushcart Prize for decades. Bill Henderson is the founding editor of the Pushcart Prize series. He received the Ivan Sandroff Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Book Critics Circle and the Poets and Writers Barnes Noble Writers for Writers Award. Bill has also somehow miraculously, while doing all of this, managed to publish 6 memoirs and a book of fiction. Among the memoirs are Tower, Simple Gift, All My Dogs, and Cathedral. I want to also add that he's a dear friend and a lasting inspiration. Bill?
I don't understand this stuff. Does anybody? I don't understand fire or electricity either, so figure it out, or God. Anyway, when you figure it out, give me a call. Thank you, Phil. That was wonderful. And we've been at this now for so long, Phil and I, in the Writers Studio, decades and decades, and it's just been wonderful to be celebrated every year by the Writers Studio. And of course, it's not Pushcart or Henderson that's being celebrated. It's the writers and the small press publishers around the world these days that keep this thing going. I'm just a secretary. And the book, even though it's very hefty, could never include everything that is wonderful that's been produced in so many countries of the world by small press editors and small press publishers who could give a damn about money, by the way. And that's why they're so damn good. So I want to thank you, Joel, and also Phil and Monica, and I'll get on to thanking a few more people, and then we'll get to our readers. Ruth Whitman is our managing editor. She's out there in Berkeley, California, in our Berkeley office. Mary Kornblum is our art director. Thanked her. John Baker of Publishers Weekly has been with this series from day one when he was an editor at Publishers Weekly, and has given us reviews over the decades. 46 years, going on 47. That's a long damn time, I'll tell you. And sometimes I think about it, that's really a long time. Anyway, Lily Henderson, my daughter, and my wife, Jeannie Henderson, and also Cedar Fox, one little outfit called Word Theater, reach around the world, which takes stories and from the Pushcart Prize, and great actors read the stories, and that is a very emotional experience, especially if you just have met these writers on the page. And Julia Reedhead of W.W. Norton is with us in Cybergas. She's the president, and Norton, as Phil just said, is a terrific independent publisher. They have kept us going for decades, although I'm sure we don't make a dime for Norton. And finally, my friend Dan Dolgen. He's my oldest friend in the world. Over 60 years, he's on our board too, and great influence. And now I'm going to introduce Arthur. And there's so much to say about Arthur, that Arthur Z, that it's just too long. So he's done 11 books of poetry published, most recently new and collected and selected from Copper Canyon. He's the winner of the 2019 National Book Award in Poetry. That's a really big deal, by the way. He's been 4 times featured in the Pushcart Prize. In fact, Arthur was one of our guest poetry editors a few years back. So Arthur, out there in the cloud.
Pleasure to be here this evening to help celebrate the latest Pushcart anthology. And thank you, Bill. And I just want to say what a labor of love, 46, 47 years. It's truly amazing, not just as an author, but also as one of the poetry co-editors. It's just amazing how you've gone from year to year and showcased exceptional writing, and also brought attention to the independent presses and magazines, which are a vital force in our literary culture. I'm going to read 3 poems, and each one appeared in a different edition. This first poem appeared in Pushcart 44. It's written in invented form in one-line stanzas, and each line picks up a word or words from the previous line. The White Orchard. Under a supermoon, you gaze into the orchard. A glass blower shapes a glowing orange mass into a horse. You step into a space where you once lived. Crushed mica glitters on plastered walls. A raccoon strolls in moonlight along the top of an adobe wall. Swimming in a pond, we notice a reflected cottonwood on the water. Clang, a deer leaps over the gate. Every 15 minutes, an elephant is shot for its tusks. You mark a bleached, earless lizard against the snowfall of this white page. The skins of eggplants glistening in a garden, or bodies glistening by firelight. Though skunks once ravaged corn, or bright moments cannot be ravaged. Sleeping near a canal, you hear lapping waves. At dawn, waves lapping, and the noise of men unloading scallops and shrimp. No noise of gunshots. You focus on the branches of 100-year-old apple trees. Opening the door, we find red and yellow rose petals scattered on our bed. Then light years. You see pear branches farther in the orchard as the moon rises. Branches bending under the snow of this white page. This next poem appeared in Pushcart 35. It's called Labrador Tea, which is actually the name of a shrub, a species that grows in Alaska and northern Canada, and the Inuit pick the leaves and make this tea. Labrador Tea. Labrador leaves in a jar with a kerchief lid release an Arctic aroma when simmered on a stove. Yesterday, when fire broke out in the bosque, the air reeked of cauliflower in a steamer when water evaporates and the pot scalds. Although Apache plume, along with clusters of western peppergrass, makes fragrant the wash, owls that frequent the hole high up the bank of the arroyo already come and go. Yesterday, though honey locust leaves shimmered in a gust, I marveled no wasp nest had yet formed under the porch. Repotting a spathiphyllum, then uncoiling a hose, I suddenly hear surf through open slats of a door. Sprinklers come on in the dark. A yellow slug crawls on a rain-slicked banana leaf as the mind flits, imbibes, leaves clothed underneath with rusty hairs, suffuse a boreal light glistening on tidal pools. And I'm just going to read one last poem which appeared in this year's Pushcart Prize anthology. And I just want to give thanks to Emily Hancock at St. Bridget Press, who published this poem in letterpress. So she said all the words by hand. Sleepers. A black-chinned hummingbird lands on a metal wire and rests for 5 seconds. For 5 seconds, a pianist lowers his head and rests his hands on the keys. A man bathes where irrigation water forms a pool before it drains into the river. A mechanic untwists a plug, and engine oil drains into a bucket. For 5 seconds, I smell peppermint through an open window. Recall where a wild leaf grazed your skin. Here touch comes before sight. Holding you, I recall across a canal the sounds of men laying cuttlefish on ice at first light. Before first light, physical contact or hearts beating, patter of female rain on the roof. As the hummingbird whirs out of sight, the gears of a clock mesh at varying speeds. We hear a series of ostinato notes and are not tied to our body's weight on earth. Thank you. The next reader is Kevin Wilson. Kevin Wilson is the author of 5 books, most recently, Nothing to See Here, published by Echo in 2019. He lives in Suwanee, Tennessee, and teaches at the University of the South. His new novel, We Are Fugitives, will appear in the fall of 2022.
Thank you so much, Arthur. And I'm really very much humbled to follow a writer like you. Very quickly, I just want to say thank you to Bill and Joel and Philip and everyone associated with the Pushcart Prize, and what a huge honor this is. And thanks to Sasha and everyone at the Southern Review who published this story. I'm going to read a very small part of it. It's called Biology. Last night, someone from my hometown posted on Facebook to say that our 8th grade biology teacher, Mr. Reynolds, had died. There was a link to the local funeral home's memorial page where I stared at a picture of Mr. Reynolds as I remembered him 25 years previous. His thick black rimmed glasses and buzz cut, his hair so blonde, it looked white. He had gray eyes. His face was always red, not like a rash, but like a tint to his skin. His first name was Franklin, and there was a time when I would call him by that name. I realized I was crying, had been crying for a while, and my boyfriend Bobby said, "Oh God, what's wrong? What's going on, Patrick?" And he held me, and I put down the tablet, and I didn't say a word because I didn't know what to say. because nothing I said would have made sense to him. It wouldn't have made sense to anyone else in the world. The only person who would have understood was dead. In 8th grade, like every single grade leading up to that year, I was unpopular. I was too fat for sports, and I had all these weird habits, little tics, that even though everyone in our town had grown used to them, it kept me from getting close to anyone. I cried sometimes if people smiled at me too long. I grunted when I was reading to myself. I was an island, but not far enough away from this huge body of land that was the rest of my town, so I could easily feel the separation. And it was clear to most kids that I was effeminate, too sensitive, which suggested something was deficient in my makeup. And Mr. Reynolds was famously weird. He lived with his mother. Mr. Reynolds was shy and quiet, and students always talked over him when he was teaching. He drove this tiny little foreign car, and the driver's side door was completely different color than the rest of the car, and he duct taped the rear bumper, but sometimes it would loosen and drag across the asphalt parking lot. Every day he wore short sleeve shirts, weird plaid, and olive green chinos and ugly brown loafers. He was freakishly tall, which seemed to embarrass him, and he didn't take advantage of it in order to make himself seem imposing. He just looked stretched out like a cartoon character. I liked listening to him, the way he talked about this kind of bird where the babies fight each other to the death in order to be the one who gets the food from the mother. One time he brought in this weird slug and told us about how its mouth was like sandpaper and could tear out the eyes of a baby bird or something like that. He talked about egg wars where different bird species tried to F each other over. Maybe 8th grade was the bird year. I don't know. Maybe Mr. Reynolds just really loved birds, but he seemed embarrassed by the sections that talked about human biology, our own weird bodies. And so he focused on animals, the natural world, the horrific things that every living thing did just to stay alive. I made straight A's in his class and sometimes even drew pictures of dead animals to support my short essay answers. "Good job," he'd whisper as he passed by my desk, handing back tests. He would stoop down and place it right in front of me, and I'd feel dizzy a little. Pretty soon, I started eating lunch in his classroom. One time I asked him about the car, and he chuckled. "They hate that car, the kids, don't they?" he said. "Well, why don't you just get a new one? They cost a lot of money. I like that car. It's a kind of science project, just seeing how long I can keep it running." I kind of understood him. And then he said, "This might help you, Patrick. If people think you're strange, different, they can be cruel. They look for instability. My car, it's not me, right? It's just this piece of metal. I drive to work every day, but people can look at it and laugh and they think it hurts me, but it doesn't, because it's not me. If you give people something easy, they'll take it. And sometimes that's all they need." I thought about how there were so many other things about Mr. Reynolds that the kids made fun of, but I knew what he meant. I reached into my backpack and pulled out these huge bricks of index cards. "Now, what is this?" he asked. "Death cards," I told him. "Is this your thing?" he asked. "I think it could be," I said. I showed him how it worked. There were 4 stacks: childhood, young adult, adulthood, old age. For each stack, there were life events with death cards mixed in. The object was to draw 4 cards from each stack without getting a death card. If you got a death card during young adult, you looked at the life events up to that point, and that was the sum of your life. "What happens if you make it all the way through the game?" he asked. I couldn't believe he was taking it seriously. I was shaking. "You still die, but you die in your sleep," I told him, peacefully. He seemed to like this, and so we played. Mr. Reynolds won a spelling bee and escaped from a kidnapper and rescued a puppy and got a dirt bike for Christmas. An amazing childhood. He made it all the way to his second card of adulthood before a business rival poisoned him, and this pleased him. "This is a good game," he said. "I play it all the time," I told him. He reached into his desk and pulled out a blank index card. He drew a sketch of a man, a cartoony version of himself, standing in front of a chalkboard. He wrote at the top, "Become a junior high science teacher." And then he slipped it into the middle of the adulthood deck. "I hope I never get that one," he said. "Maybe that's like your own secret death card," I said, and this made him smile. which made him turn a brighter shade red. Thank you. It's really my pleasure to introduce the next reader, Taylor Johnson. Taylor's from Washington, D.C. He's the author of Inheritance from Alice James Books, winner of the Norma Faber First Book Award from the Poetry Society of America, and the Judith A. Markowitz Award for Emerging Writers from Lambda Literary. His poems appear in Poetry Magazine, the Paris Review, and Scalawag, among other journals. Please welcome Taylor Johnson.
Thank you, Kevin. That was a great story. It's really a pleasure to be here with all y'all tonight virtually. It's a pleasure to be included in this anthology. It's a great honor. I'm going to read my poem, Trances Against Nostalgia, which appears in this anthology, and it's an honor to be here. And then I'll read one poem after that. Thanks for listening. Trances Against Nostalgia. Every day I build the little boat, my body boat, hold for the unique one, the formless soul, the blue fire that coaxes my being into being. Yes, there was music in the woods, and I was in love with the trees, and a beautiful man grew my heartbeat in his hands, and there was my mother's regret that I slept with. To live there is pointless. I'm building the boat the same way I'd build a new love, looking ahead at the terrain, and the water is rising, and the generous ones are moving on. Oh, new day, I get to build the boat I tell myself to live again. Somehow I made it out of being 15 and wanting to jump off the roof of my attic room. Somehow I survived my loneliness and throwing up in a jail cell. Oh, new day, I've broken my own heart. The boat is still here, is fortified in my brokenness. I've picked up the hammer every day and forgiven myself. There is a new language I'm learning by speaking it. I'm a blind cartographer. I know the way, fearing the distance. Oh, new day, there isn't a part of you I don't love to fear. I'm holding hands with the poet speaking of light, saying, I made it up, I made it up. And then I'll read just one section of another poem called Hymn. Thank you again for listening. It's a pleasure to be here. Song and secret, song of spite and spirit, song in the temple, temple of song, and perpetual farewell. Sudden, oh, song fallen on me as a passing wind, naming as the wind names, absence, farewell. Oh, shadow song whose hill is green and leaving, right my walk in glory begin. When the trees were leafless, I put my voice, oh tenuous air, among the barren places, among even the nothingness of frost, thinking I knew myself, oh fortifier, oh hidden in the weeds, going green, a green concert, hollow green. Oh ship, you're going on without me is my resume entire. Thy keel floats on, oh possibility, if I anchor as you, if I set my anchor here, if I can hum through the necessary masterpiece, if I can respond in kind to the loneliness of Wyeth's grape wine, recognizing, turning the corner in the great museum that I am the drifter, O river, with his back turned to his fashioner. How long had I suffered, white-knuckled, anchored to my name, wanting clearly to walk the wide avenues, wearing ornate buttons, wishing to be loved by the god of syntax, had gone mad and gone, tonguing out my name. This nothingness, I'd proved it upon my pulse, realized the self was daily, one moment into the next, as turning the corner, I expect everyone I've known to appear with my other name, a coin in the mouth, a rotten tooth, as if I'm nothing when not regarded as light is, as is the ancient tongue buried below perceivable language, its many tessellations into sound. I want to be called as you call yourself, I say to the unfolding blooms, how they hold perfection and not announce. Do not announce on the wide avenues the mountain's grandeur. The bloom takes part in the mountain. The mountain is my true lover who, before the road, humbles me when I set out trying to know, to understand what is below knowing. Love the mountain, whose blue face I rise toward, who does not betray, who is mist clothed, whose water I gather as breathing, who has been one tree, who has been a seed, who stills itself in battle, who cannot ask if then thou gavest, whose oath to the bloom is unreachable. O joiner, let me among that private communion. Let me be all, as if I had all. Thank you. I'm gonna read the bio of the next reader, who is Lindsay Starck. Lindsay Starck is based in Minneapolis, where she swims in the lakes and skis in the streets. Her first novel, Noah's Wife, was published by G.P. Putnam Sons in 2016. Her short prose has recently appeared in or is forthcoming in Agni, the New England Review, the Southern Review, Plowshares, and the Cincinnati Review. She is currently at work on a short story collection and a Slender Man-inspired novel called Monsters We Have Made.
Thank you, Taylor. Thanks for that reading. Thanks to Bill and Philip and Joel and all my fellow writers. I wanted to also thank the New England Review for having such faith in my story. So I'm reading from Baikal. If you have the book with you, it's on page 347. Sorry, my day job is a professor, so follow along. And I just wanted to show you it's written in this question answer format. So it's kind of a call and response. So I'll try to perform that as best I can on Zoom. Thank you. So this is Baikal. What was she thinking? That depends. When she stepped onto the tarmac in Irkutsk, the sky crisp and glittering, she was wondering why it had taken her so long to come to Siberia. But earlier, when she boarded the stale plane in Beijing, she was trying not to think about the world's first marathoner. You know, the one who died. And when her husband dropped her at the airport curb in Minneapolis, she was wondering if he'd miss her. He certainly would. They've been married 8 years. Besides, lately he's been missing her, even when she's standing right in front of him. Last Sunday, after she'd returned from a 15-mile run, she'd been flipping pancakes on the stovetop while he scrolled through headlines on his phone at the counter across from her. There were no more than 3 feet between them. But when he glanced up and saw a bead of sweat slide past her ear to her chin, her face rosy from the heat of the gas flame, he'd been struck simultaneously by the urge to wipe it away and by the fear that if he tried, he wouldn't be able to reach her. What does that mean? He can't say exactly. All he knows is that he has been his wife. She finally finished between the sliding glass airport terminal. His fingers grew cold around the steering wheel and he leaped out of the car and almost dashed to her. He wanted to crush the warm weight of her to his chest. He wanted to tug her body back into his orbit and to resume his place in hers. But then the traffic control man began striding toward him with a menacing orange stick. And so he crawled into the Toyota and pulled away from the curb and turned the wheels toward home. With every tick of the odometer, the invisible thread between them tightened and stretched and grew closer to snapping. Did she feel it too? Yes, she did. She does. The ice is violet in this light, perilous and beautiful. And with every step she takes across it, she senses her distance from her husband growing. As she runs, struggling to find her rhythm, she hears the gas bubbling from the bottom of the lake and striking the snow-dusted surface right beneath her slipping feet. At the halfway point, she stops for water in a heated tent and sees one runner being treated for the frostbite on his nose. Another runner, a young man in his mid-20s, is pale and trembling and asking one of the volunteers over and over again, what is he doing here? That's when the pressure in her rib cage grows so fierce that she doubles over. She remembers walking into the airport and watching the Toyota roll out of sight. What the hell was she trying to prove? At that moment, there was still time. So why didn't she pick up her luggage and go back home? Where is home? Home is a drafty Victorian tilting on red clay bluffs over Lake Superior. The Toyota is parked now on the steep slope of the driveway, its wheels turned in and the emergency brake activated. The curtains are gauzy and the walls are painted indigo, and in the summer the wind whips off the lake and through the windows and the house feels like a moving, breathing thing. Days like that are almost enough to make a person forget about the rotting beams and the crumbling basement's packed floor that is, quite frankly, terrifying to him. More often than not, it is she who braves the spiders to reach the rattling wash machine. She's always been more courageous than he. There is no reason for him to be worried about her, right? There is no reason to be worried. Is he worried? Of course he's worried. Only a crazy person wouldn't be worried. The official marathon boasts the race as one of the most extreme in the world. 26 miles across the deepest, coldest freshwater lake. Ice shivering underfoot and hot spring bubble and thunder beneath the surface. The cuts and gaps on the course, the unexpected splits. The snow that can storm down from the eastern Cyan without warning, spinning around the runners, slipping beneath their soles, powdering their face masks and obstructing their vision. Sometimes the conditions plummet so quickly that the race is canceled after it's already started, and the runners have to be tracked down and rounded up in heated tents. He'd researched the marathon for months, the computer screen glowing in his darkened office while his wife dreamed in their oversized bed at the other end of the hallway. And so he knows that 2 years ago, a young runner from New Zealand collapsed and died only a mile from the finish line. No cause or explanation, his heart simply stopped. That's Lake Baikal, the bearded Siberian organizer had told news cameras with a shrug. Sunlight slanted off the snow behind him, and the wolf fur framed the hood of his parka, framed his face in spiky shadows. What can we say? She is tough. She is cold. She does not show mercy. She? Yes, he noticed that too. It's not uncommon for the locals to refer to the lake as a living being. Some of the runners, he'd read, embraced the shamanistic element by kissing the ice at the starting line or talking to it between increasingly ragged breaths as the miles lurch by and their loneliness swells with their feet. It's bleak out there beneath the flat granite sky, glacial, silent. This isn't the New York City Marathon. It's not Boston or Paris or Tokyo where spectators throng the streets with handmade signs and applaud from the balconies of high-rise apartment buildings. On Lake Baikal, if you want to hear people cheer you on, you've got to imagine them. You've got to conjure up your own illusions, look for mirages in the crystal fog of your own breath. What kinds of mirages? It depends on the runner. Take his wife, for instance. As she continues to drift across the ice, step by ginger step, she dreams of her husband waiting for her at the finish line. A mug of cocoa in his plush down mittens, an apology on his cracked dry lips. To her surprise, she dreams of children waiting too, trotting on the crusty snow in tiny parkas, waving smudged drawings of the famous Baikal seals. What children? Their children, the ones they didn't have. Thank you. And now it is my very great honor, I feel very starstruck to be introducing Dorianne Laux, who just taught her poems in class last week, so it's amazing to be here. Dorianne Laux' sixth collection, Only as the Day is Long, New and Selected Poems, was named a finalist for the 2020 Pulitzer Prize for Poetry. Her fifth collection, The Book of Men, was awarded the Patterson Prize. Her fourth book of poems, Facts About the Moon, won the Oregon Book Award and was shortlisted for the Lenore Marshall Poetry Prize. Laux is also the author of Awake, What We Carry, a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award, Smoke, as well as a fine small press edition, The Book of Women. She is the co-author of the celebrated text, The Poet's Companion, a guide to the pleasures of writing poetry. Here's Dorianne Laux.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'd like to thank Plume Magazine for choosing my poem and for the Pushcart. This is my second Pushcart. My first was 30 years ago. So this is wonderful. I'm going to read my poem from the Pushcart, and it's called Midnight is a Beautiful Curse. Blue water in a pond goes black, spills down the gutter like a vine, its mineral smell, its splash of black pearls. The moon is a silver spoon sunk in the galaxy's cold soup. I don't know where the light ends and I begin. When I sleep, I'm a vulture, my bald red head slick in the belly of a deer, my eyelashes lit with gore, my dark mouth done with kissing. I unwind its power with my beak, devour its unborn into eternity, disappear its entrails into a bed of acorns and pine needles. When I wake, I turn back into a scientist, looking for the intersection between my heart and my hunger. If we understood the beauty of the world, we would curse it, let it eat us alive if we let it. The hidden music inside us measured out like a necklace of bones, alleys we cultivate in the quiet, the hidden life that grows without light, mushrooms and mold, spider plants and snake plants, drosnia, the delicate, narrow, many-leaved fronds of the maidenhead fern, turning in the dark on its thin black stalk. Thank you. And I'll read a new poem from my next collection, the title poem, I think, of that collection, and it's called Life on Earth. The odds are we should never have been born, not one of us, not 1 in 400 trillion to be exact. Only one among the 250 million released in a flood of semen that glides like a glassine limousine filled with tadpoles of possible people, one of whom may or may not be you, a being made of water and blood, a creature with eyeballs and limbs that end in fists, a you with all your particular perfumes, the chords of your sinewy legs singing as they form, your organs humming and buzzing with new life, moonbeams lighting up your brain's gray coils, the exquisite hills of your face, the human toy your mother longs for, your father yearns to hold, the unmistakable you who will take your first breath, your first step, bang a copper pot with a wooden spoon, trace the lichen growing on a boulder you climb to see the wild expanse of a field, the one whose heart will yield to the yellow forsythia, named after William Forsythe, not the American actor with piercing blue eyes, but the Scottish botanist who discovered the buttery bells on a highland hillside blooming to beat the band, zigzagging down an unknown Scottish slope. And those are only a few of the things you will one day know, slowly chipping away at your ignorance and doubt. You who were born from ashes and will return to ash. When you think you might be through with this body and soul, look down at an anthill or up at the stars. Remember your gambler chances, the bounty of good luck you were born for. Thank you. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce Ifeoma Sesiana Amobi, who was born in Anita, Nigeria, a graduate of Cornell University and the University of Pittsburgh. She earned her MFA from the Iowa Writers Workshop. Her story, A Small Blip on an Eternal Timeline, has been selected for the Pushcart Prize Series 2022. Her story begins, Amika and I built our kingdom in a slanted row house on a patch of green grass in Highland Park, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Going on to prove a kingdom can be built anywhere by anyone with anything at hand. Welcome, Miss Amobi.
Thank you so much, Dorianne, for that wonderful introduction. I'm so honored to be here with everyone. Before I read, I would like to thank Bill Henderson and the Pushcart Prize Committee for this great, great honor. It's been such a blessing to me. I also want to thank Philip Schultz, Joel Hinman, the Writer Studio for putting together this lovely reading. I'm so happy and so honored to be here with the other wonderful authors reading tonight. I would also like to thank Narrative Magazine, where my story was originally published. Thank you, Tom Jenks. Thank you, Carol Ligarian, Mimi Cush, Holly Bridges, Jack Schiff, everyone at Narrative Magazine for your support. You've also been a blessing. God bless. A small blip on an eternal timeline. Ameka and I built our kingdom in a slanted row house on a patch of green grass in Highland Park, Pittsburgh, PA. Our floors creaked, our toilet growled, our heater hiccuped and often went out for the night, but it was our kingdom, ours. Our little hideaway where time stopped for us, stretching into forever at our whim. It was where I could paint pomegranates and daffodils and portraits of an eager-eyed girl without feeling like I was wasting my life away. It was where Mecca could beat his igwa to the Afro beats of Fela Kuti and dream. It infuriated me the way he hunched over his desk into the early morning hours, squeezing his head with sweaty palms, huffing through the names of pathogenic organisms and their virulence factors for med school, chasing a fantasy that wasn't even his. Shadows of a dead throne in a dusty village in a land far, far away that his father, its long lost king, wanted to bring back to life. Lurking in these shadows were tales my mother used to whisper in my ear of war and corruption, aunts, uncles, and cousins who took weekly Sunday medicine so they wouldn't drop dead from disease, of chosen people whose divine purpose was to journey into the heart of the other world to save home. My family came to America when I was 1. And in my tiny luggage bag, my mother stuffed dreams too large for me to carry. I would pull Ameka away from his desk and into bed when the taste of bitter became too much for me to bear. Our arms and legs would entwine like thirsty vines, and heat from the blood rushing through our veins thrilled us. After making love, we cupped our hands to each other's lips and whispered our deepest fears into them. With a flourish of our fingers, we released them into the universe. It was a cool night in April, 5 years after I left my mother, 2 years after I met Ameka, and 9 months after I moved in, his wandering concubine of 23, when he grabbed my waist at 2 a.m., my heavy eyes wandering in the dark, and told me that he did not want to be with anyone else. You will paint, he said, and I will play the igwa forever. I went cold, then hot, real hot, and aching fire devoured me. I turned to him and cooled. When will you tell your parents about me? About you, I whispered. He wove his fingers through mine. I caressed the raised flesh of his wrist where he had just gotten his first tattoo. Earlier, we'd been running back from a U2 concert, smashed and happy like the rest of the folks who attended. Me leading him by the hand, weaving our way through bodies, still screaming, still dancing, the rumble of the ground underneath our feet lifting us. He was singing, "I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For," at the top of his lungs and his beautiful, rugged Igbo accent botching the words when he suddenly pulled me into a tattoo parlor we were passing. While waiting for the artist, Emeka's light dimmed. When he spoke of home, he went on and on and on about President Buhari's lies, how he was only out for himself. I grabbed him by the face and told him life only comes to a person once. Don't we have a responsibility in this unforgiving world to find our happiness before we die? He took a long, deep breath. When the tattoo artist was ready, Emeka pointed to the tattoo on the back of my wrist of a tiny phoenix with wings of fire and asked the artist to copy it. Later that night, Emeka roared, "This is me! This is me!" I held his palms, caressing the calloused skin that came from planting and carrying yams on his grandfather's farm in Ogidi before he left for America at the age of 15 to pursue his father's dreams. Hanging above us on the ceiling was a painting Emeka helped me make of two yellow daffodils reaching for the heavens. We stared up at it. I squeezed his fingers tight, so tight I felt I was bursting. "Do you like it here?" I asked. He nestled his bristly hot cheek in the nook of my neck. "In America, of course, my sweet. I mean with me, dummy." He chuckled. "You know I do. So much. So much." He placed his other hand over his head. His most prized prospect was someone named Amaka, a law student from the University of Pittsburgh, where he went to school. I made him show me her Facebook page. There were pictures of her all dolled up in custom-made halter tops and form-fitting skirts of the finest Nigerian prints. She was runner-up for Miss Nigeria. She came from the same ancestral village as Emeka and Ogidi. Members of his family knew members of hers. She called him last week to meet in person for lattes at Tazoduro, our favorite spot. He agreed. After the call, I took his phone and hurled it out the window into the bushes. I tried to pull my hand away from his. He tightened his grip. Emeka asked, "Do you think I like what I'm doing to you?" "To me? I hate it. If I had my way, I would leave school, oh. I would. I would live my life playing music. I'm not as brave as you, Soma. I'm learning. I beg, give me a little more time. I will tell them," he said, his face pressing into my neck. The toilet growled. "I've given you 2 years. Help me, Biko. I am helping you. Apply for 1 grant. One fellowship. Get your GED and go to a visual arts college. Show my parents that what you were doing can move and shake. Then we have some leverage." He had said this a week ago, and I told him to never say it again. I felt the heat in my body rise to a boil as a familiar sense of doom came over me. I yanked my hand away from his and sat up. He sat up. "Isn't this what you've always wanted?" he said. "To do the extraordinary? How can you do it if you sit around this house painting for an imaginary audience?" "Oh, are you a figment of my imagination?" He sighed. "Are you?" I repeated. I grabbed his face and squeezed his skin like it was putty. I squeezed harder. He pried my hands off, gritting his teeth in what I knew was anger. In the dirt-stained window, I caught my reflection. Dark as night, all sharp, angular lines jutting out into the world, scattered and dangerous. "Prove your mother wrong," he said. According to my mother, I was never right with the world. She had let it out when I was 9 in a fit of hysteria after finding me at the fridge tasting sips of my father's beer. I'd been born an Iwanje child, she yelled. A child who dies young and returns again to torment her parents only to be called back to the spirit world. She had lost her first child in the womb, so she had a native doctor do a rite on me before leaving for America. One tiny vertical slash on my right cheek to keep me in their world. Her new beginning, her new hope. I never got the grade she wanted. Never felt anything like a God watching over me. I didn't understand why I was born where I was born to the mother who birthed me. You were on a path to misfortune, she cried. What woman lives a good life playing with crayons and opening her legs to men? What am I doing? I whispered, shutting my eyes. What am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? I took in a slow, deep burn of breath. I opened them and saw Mecca smiling at me. His fingers grazed the spikes of my hair. I cooled. So Medina the Great, he whispered, when will you let the world see what I see? Thank you. I am so honored to introduce the next reader, Grace Schulman. Grace Schulman has received the Frost Medal for Distinguished Lifetime Achievement in American Poetry and is a member of the American Academy of Arts and Letters. Her latest book is The Marble Bed, published by Turtle Point Press, an 8th book of poems, and a new selected poems will follow. Her recent memoir is Strange Paradise, Portrait of a Marriage, also published by Turtle Point Press. And her essay collection is First Loves and Other Adventures, published by University of Michigan Press. Among Schulman's other honors are the Aiken Taylor Award for Poetry, a Guggenheim Fellowship, the Delmore Schwartz Memorial Award, a New York University's Distinguished Alumni Award, and a fellowship from the New York Foundation for the Arts. She has won 5 Pushcart Prizes and has been featured 7 times on Poetry Daily. About her poems, Harold Bloom has written, Grace Schulman has developed into one of the permanent poets of her generation. Schulman holds the PhD from New York University, editor of the poems of Marianne Moore, published by Viking. She's Distinguished Professor of English at Baruch College, SUNY. Schulman is former director of the Poetry Center, 92nd Street Y, from 1974 to 1984, and former poetry editor of The Nation from 1971 to 2006. Please welcome Grace Schulman.
Thank you, Ifeoma. I'm so pleased to be here among you really fine writers and to be reading for the Pushcart Prize and for the Writers Studio, 2 of the most noble institutions in American poetry. And I'm very glad to say that I've known them and had faith in them from the very beginning. My friends, Philip Schultz and Bill Henderson. I'd like to read the poem of mine that was in the latest Pushcart Prize anthology, because it's on page 444 if you happen to have the book. Because in a wounded universe, the tufts of grass still glisten. The first daffodil shoots up through ice melt, and a red-tailed hawk perches on a cathedral spire. And because children toss a fire-red ball in the yard where a schoolhouse facade was scarred by vandals. and joggers still circle a dry reservoir. Because a rainbow flaunts its painted ribbons and slips them somewhere underneath the earth. Because in a smoky bar, the trombone blares louder than street sirens. Because those who can no longer speak of pain are singing. And when on this wide meadow in the park, a full moon still outshines the city lights, and on returning home below the North Star, I see new bricks and glass where the towers fell. And I remember my love's calloused hand soften in my hand while crabapple blossoms showered our laps, and a yellow rose opened with its satellites of orange buds. Because I cannot lose the injured world without losing the world, I'll have to praise it. This next poem I'm going to read is an early pandemic poem. I live on Washington Square, and in my neighborhood, the streets were cleared of people, and I got to thinking what the world would be like without us in it. Gone. From my window, I see the world without us in it. A vacant park, a silver maple sheltering no reader, a cherry tree dressed like a bride betrayed, her wedding canceled, a dogwood tree whose whites will fall without regretful eyes. No baby strollers, no candy wrappers stuffed in bins, just a sign, no bicycles, and memories of skateboard pirouettes. Around us, death, the numbers spin the mind. Fever dreams, the last breath held, alone. I hadn't known death had undone so many. This park reminds us it was once a field for the unclaimed dead of galloping yellow fever. Construction workers dug up skeletons that had lain for years beneath our footsteps. Death in the hanging helm, a rooted gallows. Now the clear air, pollution-free, is poison for walkers, while trees stand stern, immune. Sad paradox. For comfort, I recall, Camille Pissarro would have lingered here. He painted Paris gardens from a window, having left his island's sprawling shores for tighter scenes. He gazed at people, matchsticks from above, in ones and twos. Below, the park's unlittered paths are mute. But wait, just now a mournful, prayerful sax, unseen from somewhere, unlooses notes, calls me to the window, and I hear the sounds I can't imagine days without. I'd like to read now a new poem that will be in my new and selected poems called Again the Dawn. New and selected poems coming scheduled for November 2022. This poem is called Scallop Shell. See them at low tide, scallop shells glittering on a scallop-edged shore, whittled by water into curvy rows the shape of waves that kiss the sand, only to erode it. Today, I walked that shoreline humming Camino Santiago, the road to St. James's tomb where pilgrims traveled, scallop badges on their capes, and chanted prayers for a miracle to cure disease. And so I, stirred by their purpose, hunted for scallop shells shaped like pleated fans, with mouths that open and close to steer them from predators. I scooped up a fan and blew off sand grains, thinking for that one moment of how St. James's body rose from sea decked with scallops, and of this empty beach in another austere time. Let this unholy pilgrim implore the scallop shell, silvery half moon, save us. And now I want to thank you all for letting me hear your beautiful words. And thank you, Bill Henderson, and thank you, Philip Schultz, for your wonderful work in poetry.
If you don't know about the Writer Studio, we are a writing workshop program. We have three main areas of focus: fiction, memoir, and poetry. We teach online, and we're also virtual in an environment, just like this, and have been since COVID, hoping to get back in the live classroom. And we're primarily based in New York, but we have satellite programs in Tucson, Arizona, in San Francisco, California, and now in Rome, Italy.